how can we so often see women go missing in and around these men, and then for some reason in the following days those exact men end up doing a big Home Depot haul? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Kate Philpott and I cover true crime and missing person cases on my channel. Today we're talking about a case that, in all honesty, has not gotten anywhere near enough media attention. It's gotten some, but I really had to go digging to even find this case, and it's a mind-blowing case. And this is the case of Esmerelda Gonzalez. Esmerelda Gonzalez was born on the 26th of May 1995, making her only just 24 years old at the time of her horrific death in 2019. She was originally from Michoacan in the west of Mexico, and her family had emigrated to the US not long after she was born. Therefore, this case takes place in the US, in the neighborhood where she was living, which was actually a residential neighborhood in Las Vegas. At the time, she was a communications student in the University of Las Vegas, and she was working as a model, or potentially as a sex worker. Her Instagram, for instance, had a very risque kind of vibe to it, and she also had over 300,000 followers on there. And in that Instagram bio, she described herself as a real estate investor, a humanitarian, social scientist, anthropologist, and a foreign model. She was absolutely gorgeous, and she seemed to have this killer confidence. So she had the looks, but she also had the brains and ambition. She was apparently a really good chess player, and she was hoping to go to law school as well. Esmeralda was described as loving, kind, and caring by her friends and family, and she was said to have an infectious laugh. But things weren't always the easiest for Esmeralda. She really struggled with her mental health and had previously been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And she was on medication for these mental illnesses. Let's talk about the lead up to her disappearance, right? It was a warm summer's day in Vegas on the 30th of May, 2019. And Esmeralda had had an unusual day. First, she asked her neighbour Brent Smith to drive her to the BMW dealership because she'd gotten locked out of her car. He obliged and drove her down there, and he drove her back home. It was a minor inconvenience, but the start of a very mysterious chain of events. The next time she was seen, she was walking around her neighbourhood in just lingerie and high heels. She was disoriented and stumbling around, and this was all captured on CCTV footage. Clearly, some people thought she was drunk or on DRUGS, while others thought that she was experiencing a mental break of some kind, and none of these options have really been proven any which way. But it's important to mention here that there is some unverified information about Esmeralda becoming more active in the DRUG world, relying heavily on crystal you know what, which obviously only had a dire effect on her mental health as well as her finances. And it's theorized that this is why she had to work in the adult entertainment industry. Also, that day when she was walking around her neighborhood in the lingerie and high heels, she was seen asking people for a lift. And to this day, we don't really know for sure where she was trying to go or why she was dressed so provocatively, although there may be some clues to that later. Another thing, she had been on medication, but she'd stopped taking it 2 weeks prior to this. So this could very well have been a major contributing factor to her strange behaviour. But then things get even stranger. Esmeralda wandered up to a random house in her neighbourhood and just tried to go in. The people who owned the house noticed her trying to go in, and they were like, excuse me, you've got the wrong house, you need to leave. Which, fair enough, and she did leave. And I don't even know, was she compos mentis enough to even be embarrassed about that or whatever? It kind of doesn't seem like she was. But instead of going home after this, she went somewhere else. She went a few doors down to another house, the home of Christopher Prestopino. It's unclear as to whether this was her intended destination or if she ended up there by accident, but whatever the case, he said, sure, come on in. She went inside his home and was never seen again. Let me also mention Brent Smith, who had helped her earlier, driving her to the dealership. He was initially seen as a suspect in her disappearance, but he was cleared pretty quickly. He was just being a good neighbour. and was a little unlucky in the timing. So let's talk about Christopher Prestopino. Who was this man? Are there any clues in his typical demeanour or hobbies that might allude to anything here? Well, at the time, he was 45 years old and was a stagehand audiovisual technician in a hotel in Vegas. And he'd actually worked in that hotel for 20 years at this point. And it seems that those who knew Christopher knew that he loved women, he loved sex, and he had a lot of sex toys. He also watched a lot of adult movies, and his Facebook page made it even more clear how driven by sex he was. He had this collage on there with a rubber sex doll, some other nudity related stuff, and some text over it that said, "I still play with dolls." Ugh, wrong. And look, there's nothing wrong with a healthy sex life, but are we getting into excessive territory here? Like, it seems to be his entire personality, because he sounds like a f***ing creep to me. Not to mention, Christopher Prestopino was a convicted felon with multiple DOUG charges under his name. Not the most pure of individuals. Okay, let's put a pin in that there and we'll get back to it in a little bit and move on with discovering Esmeralda was missing. Initially, it was her brother Juan who noticed that it had been a while since he had heard from her, so he went over to her house to check on her, and actually her doors were unlocked, and not just unlocked, but they were open, and the lights were on in the house as well, so he was thinking, oh, maybe she's in there. So he eventually went inside the house to see if she was there or in any of the rooms. I mean, she might have even just had headphones on and been listening to music, because apparently she did that quite a lot. But after checking all the rooms, he realised that Esmeralda wasn't there. But there was something very, very wrong and very fishy about the way he found her house. Her house had been thrown upside down, totally ransacked. Pieces of furniture were upside down, vases were smashed, ornaments were broken, things were thrown around everywhere, which obviously is not a good sign from the get-go. And on top of this, Esmeralda's things were there, including her phone. And her car was also there, so she didn't drive anywhere. Juan was immediately very concerned, because with her mental illnesses, she was a very vulnerable person, and now she was missing in these unusual circumstances. So he reported her missing straight away. Now, this was the end of May 2019, but for months, there were no leads. And there was also no activity on Esmeralda's bank accounts, credit cards, or anything like that. This was all until a few leads started coming in late July. These tips were saying that Christopher Prestopino had bragged to multiple people, saying that he had killed the girl who went missing in Vegas. Bragged? He bragged. Now, the investigation turned up some interesting information about Christopher's whereabouts in early June, just a few days after Esmeralda went missing. On the 6th of June, between 8:30 and 9 p.m, he was seen on CCTV entering, where would he be going? Home Depot. In there, he purchased things like concrete mix, 2 tubes of WD-40, Ocean Mist air freshener, and a bunch of other stuff, which, to be honest, I don't even know what half of this stuff is. Like stud, lime, concrete cap, fence blocks. Like I don't even know what this is. None of it sounds good. And of course, he paid in cash. Oh, and he also bought an iced coffee, as you do when you're running your casual errands. Either way, how can we so often see women go missing in and around these men, and then for some reason in the following days those exact men end up doing a big Home Depot haul? Brian Walsh, anybody? Anyway, little old Chris goes back to Home Depot the following day and buys a drill and a concrete mixing paddle. And then the next day, on the 8th, he rents a 15-foot U-Haul truck, which he had until the 10th of June, so 2 days. What is he transporting that he can't transport in his own vehicle? And of course, when police first suspected Chris, he denied everything. He denied that any such woman had even been in his home. And a little more about the details of the U-Haul truck, okay? Because Chris had this little friend who came forward and told police that for those 2 days that he had the U-Haul truck, he asked this friend to help him with something. So she came over and he told her that this woman had come over to hang out. They got high on METH. And then this girl started freaking out and talking in the devil's tongue. She also threatened to call the police on him for drugging her. So really, how willing a participant was she with these DOUGS? Of course, Christopher wanted to control this woman because he was gonna get caught, and he was already a convicted felon, so that's why he restrained her by tying her to a chair until she calmed down, or at least that was his plan. Let me tell you, the last thing that'll calm me down when I am frantic is being tied to a f***ing chair in a strange man's house. Eventually though, when he did go to untie her, good for her, this woman punched him in the face and tried to get away, to which Christopher responded by strangling her. Then this woman passed out, but he thought she was dead. So this is the story he's telling the family friend, right? And then he just cuts off the story there and goes, so I've got this big concrete block that I need to move into this U-Haul truck. Can you give us a hand? Could anything raise alarm more than this? That is extremely alarming. When Chris brought back the truck to the outlet he got it from, employees remember it smelling of very, very strong cleaning products, which was unusual because normally people will give them back like filthy and in bits. And I'm guessing this family friend was either not telling the full truth to police or they're just an idiot. How could you not cop that something insanely sketchy is going on here? Anyway, the family friend was like, sure, let's move this thing, right? Okay. So during their journey in the U-Haul truck, they stopped behind some business so that Chris could get out and throw a freezer in the dumpster. Okay, so that's one thing. They drove a little further and they stopped behind a Vegas hotel and casino. And here, Chris tried to steal a forklift. Sure, he obviously got stopped and told to leave. And at this point, the family friend gets suspicious of Chris. At this point. What is so important that he has to behave this erratically? He also kept turning up the radio really loud because according to him, the FBI was probably listening. And I will just say, right, like this is all alleged. And we don't even know who this mystery woman he was talking about in his house was, okay? So keep that in mind. And that's that story. But there is another person involved in this case whose take I would love to share with you. And that's Chris's roommate, Cassandra. Now, here's where things get real, okay? Cassandra was going around blabbing about some incident involving a woman that Chris had brought home to their house. She actually told her friend that she was involved in a sex fetish game that went wrong with Chris and this woman, whoever this woman is, right? Pause. Went wrong? What does that mean if not the ultimate? Then Cassandra's blabbing ended up getting back to the police. And although there was a bit of Chinese whispers that went on, like she told one person who told another person who told another person who told police, this is how her story went. Chris invited some woman over and they did some D-R-U-G-S. Then the woman at some point decided she wanted to leave. Chris's response to this was to tie her to not a chair, but a stripper pole in his bedroom. Okay, casually just having a stripper pole in his bedroom. I'm gonna just breeze past that. And the reason he tried to tie her up was because he didn't want her to get to the police, right? Okay, so this all makes sense. He then left her there for multiple days while he decided what to do with her. And I'm sorry, but with every single moment that she was tied up, it would be less and less reasonable to let her go. Like from his perspective anyway. Also, God knows what kind of circumstances she was forced to live in this time. Did he even bother to feed her or give her water? What about showering or going to the bathroom? A bucket was probably the best she got. All the while, Cassandra was involved with this. And who knows really how much of a part she had to play, because this is the story that originally came from her. One thing led to another then, and together, Cassandra and Chris decided they had to kill this girl. So they tried to beat her to death. Emphasis on the word tried because apparently, and this is something that Cassandra said to somebody at one point, she said she just wouldn't die. And that you'd be surprised how long someone will fight for their life. Which is just disgusting. This woman, whether Esmeralda or someone else, suffered a horrific end to their life. They suffered a lot. But as they were trying to beat this woman to death, Cassandra apparently got irritated with Chris for not being able to finish her off. And she made fun of him for it. I'm sorry, but if this is true, then both of them are just absolute pieces of shit. Cassandra then got fed up, went off to get a syringe, filled it with pool cleaner, and then injected it into this woman. And that is what eventually killed her. By the way, that would be a relatively quick death, but my God, would that be excruciating. Your organs all shut down over the course of just a few minutes. Your body tissue gets destroyed from the inside out. Your lungs stop working, your heart stops beating, and it attacks your nervous system. So you literally feel every single thing. That just sounds absolutely horrific. Let's fast forward a little to the 8th of October 2019. Something very unusual was found in the desert near Glendale, Nevada, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. It wasn't just remains, but it was a wooden structure filled with concrete. When this was looked into though, yes, they did find a body. On this body, the hands were bound, there was white tape around the head and neck, and the body was wrapped in blankets and shoved into a huge water tank, which had then been filled with concrete and put in this wooden container. On this body, there had been extreme decomposition at this point, so identification was going to be difficult. But not only that, the body also had this chemical-like smell. It wasn't just the smell of decomposition, it was chemically. And while in the process of the forensics, they drew their attention towards a few items that this body had on or beside them. There were some bits of jewelry, all designer, including a Chanel necklace and a Rolex watch worth about $40,000. That was obviously a lot. Not everybody can afford that, so that could help to narrow things down here. But when the forensics got back, it was confirmed. This was the body of Esmerelda Gonzalez. And actually, those pieces of jewelry matched pieces that she had been wearing in a few of her Instagram pictures. The prime suspects, particularly with all the he said, she said going on, were Christopher Prestipino and Cassandra. But there was someone else related to this case. Christopher also had a girlfriend. His girlfriend's name was Lisa Mort. You got a good guy there, Lisa. And basically, Lisa made this pretty stupid move because she called Chris from prison. By the way, she was in there on unrelated charges. And she told him, I just got some visitors, you gotta go. That's all I can say. She ended up being charged with harboring, concealing, or aiding a felon. Naturally, Chris went. She said, you gotta go. He went. He went to Belize, and this was in mid-October, right? But strangely enough, he actually came back about a week later. And immediately he was taken into custody at the airport and charged with murder, first-degree kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. Interestingly, around this time, he had put his house up for sale on Zillow, and he put a very aggressive disclaimer in there. He was like, do not contact James Allen on this property. He no longer will ever represent me. Damn, what did James Allen do? I am the owner, Chris Prestipino. Please contact me at this number for appointments to see this property. It is spotless and move-in ready. New paint, clean carpets. Okay. Maybe this is because he was a flight risk. Like, hell yeah, he wanted to sell his property and have no ties to the area. But I'm also thinking maybe it could have been I better sell this before anybody finds out what happened in here. Murder houses generally don't sell easy or for a good price. Just something to consider. Cassandra was also taken into police custody on the 18th of October and she was charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy charges. And in court, the judge ended up granting Chris a $500,000 bail, which he posted. So then he was put on house arrest. Interestingly, in November 2020, Chris was committed to a psychiatric hospital and the trial was put on hold. Then on the 25th of April 2023, Christopher Prestipino finally had his proper trial. This is very recent. This is just a few weeks ago. In this trial, he entered an Alford plea, which essentially allowed him to admit only that prosecutors had enough evidence to prove his guilt, but not requiring that he actually admit to the crime. So it's like, you got me, but I'm not telling you got me. He also... I don't get this. He apologized in court, but then also blamed Cassandra. Oh, I'm so sorry. It was her fault. You know, what? This guy. Anyway, wait till you hear his sentence because I'm very curious as to your thoughts on this. He was sentenced to 10 to 25 years. Does that seem a little lenient? Because, I mean, what is he, like 49 now? If he only gets 10 years, he'll be 59 and then he's just free to go? That's not good enough. Cassandra is also due to be sentenced in May, i.e. this month. So I'll update on that in the comments when that actually happens. And I think the thing is, it really seems to me like she just doesn't care. She just doesn't give a fuck. And the same with Prestipino. They ended this girl's life in the most horrific, painful way and got rid of her with as little dignity as they could, it seems. And they just don't give a fuck. So I want to have a little discussion with you, okay? There's a few big questions to talk about with this case. First of all, I'm very confused about one thing. what's the story with her house being ransacked? Because apparently the crime scene is in Chris's house. Was this ransacked after the fact to make it look like it had been broken into and it was a burglary gone wrong or something? But wouldn't that be a very risky thing to do? Like to break into a woman's house that you've already taken hostage and maybe you plan to kill her and you ransack her house? Like, people could remember seeing you there. Otherwise, I'm not entirely sure how that actually fits in. Unless her doors were just left open because she was in this disoriented state, and on an unrelated note, somebody else noticed the doors are open, nobody's home, I'm gonna go ransack the house, but then nothing seemed to be missing. And then what about premeditation? Like, how long before Esmeralda was killed did Chris and Cassandra plan to kill her? We have to bear in mind, she was in his house for multiple days before she died. So did he know the second she walked in? Did he know before she even arrived? Maybe, maybe not. What about the amount of time between when they started trying to beat her to death? I'm so sorry I have to explain this, but the amount of time between starting and her actually dying, how long was that? Because Chris was getting tired and Cassandra was getting sick of it. If you did try to go for like manslaughter, let's say, a crime of passion or defense, by trying to beat somebody up and failing and then choosing a different method, surely that just automatically means that it's premeditated, because you had plenty of time there to be like, okay, she's not dying, maybe this isn't supposed to be, versus like, she's not dying, let's try harder. Oh god. Oh. And then I also want to ask you, who is actually responsible for her death? Is it Chris? He was the one who tied her up, tried to beat her to death, but Cassandra was allegedly the one to inject her with pool cleaner. Yet Chris is the one who gets more attention on this case. It will be very interesting to find out what her sentence is when that comes out. Speaking of, what do we think of Chris's sentence? As little as 10 years for this. He could get out at 59 years old. Like, 25 years is only just scratching the surface of justice. He would be, what, 74? He should be locked up, never to return, and so should Cassandra. Okay, I know this got a little darker than we normally do, but that's just the nature of this case. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it interesting, please give me a thumbs up. Helps me a lot with the algorithm, apparently. And if you want to support the channel, you can go ahead and do that on the Patreon, patreon.com/KatePhilpott. And to keep up to date with missing person cases and true crime that I post, I do a lot of that on my TikTok. Alright, so thank you so much for being here. Well done for making it to the end of this video. Drop a comment. Answer those discussion questions. We need to talk about this for another video where a woman goes missing and a related man does a whole ass Home Depot haul. You want to watch this video next? I have no words. If you don't know about the details of the Anna Walsh case, you are about to have your mind blown. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.